Hello and happy Monday. How is everybody doing today? I guess Tuesday for some of you. I saw in the chat somebody saying, I'm in Australia, it's Tuesday. So happy Tuesday to those of you watching over there. Now, I'm going to be reacting to one of the wildest marriage versus divorce debates I've ever found on the internet. And no, it is not Michael Knowles versus Pearl Davis, because I can't deal with that right now. I cannot bring myself to watch that live for you guys. This one might even be a little bit wilder. I stumbled across this on the internet. You know that many are having debates about divorce and marriage, whether or not divorce is acceptable or it's unacceptable under any circumstances. Michael Knowles and Pearl, the red pill community, conservatives, liberals, we're all going back and forth over this topic. Today, we're going to be hearing from our West Africans on the debate about divorce and marriage. Specifically, I think this is going to be centered around Nigerians, but they make some very interesting points, some very extreme points, and we're gonna get to that. I can't wait for you guys to see it, but first we have Taylor in Nashville.
Oh, hey, yeah, interesting to say the least. Also, just gotta say, I love watching y'all fight over who's the first one to chat. And if you are watching or listening to this later, make sure you do turn on your notifications on YouTube so that you can be among the first and catch us live. So many times we get people saying, I wish I could catch this live, or this is my first live, I can't believe I'm here. Make sure you turn the notifications on, because we've seen analytics, it's a low percentage of y'all that are actually have that notification bell smashed. So make sure you do that.
You guys gotta keep up with us, keep up with us. Now let's get into this divorce debate. And like I said, this video started out wild. I watched it and I was like, okay, I watched the beginning and I'm like, okay, we have to react to this on the channel. I have to see more. Okay, here we go.
A friend of mine was hit stabbed to death just because of beans. That the beans was not soft enough for a man to eat. I've experienced coma good 3 times. I'm telling you my life history.
you saw those signs. What happened? You were in love. You just ignored the signs. Continue ignoring the signs now.
There is no marriage without fights. Let us not deceive ourselves. This is a man that I know that, oh yes, he hates me, but yet he loves me.
If your husband sexually abused your child and you find out it's true, what are you going to do?
The man will definitely
be reported.
Yeah. But that does not feel that I will divorce my husband. I want you to get that fact.
You know, we have pro-divorce, anti-divorce debates. Oftentimes, we're talking about, you know, he doesn't do the dishes, he doesn't clean, he doesn't take care of our kids, he doesn't work hard enough. We're not talking about getting stabbed to death, falling into a coma on 3 separate occasions, and whether or not they're committing acts of assault against children. So we're going to some extremes here. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Nigerian culture at all, if you guys have like seen Nigerian films. After you watch this live, go and look up like Nigerian dramas and films and watch it, and you will see how dramatic the depictions of marriage are in Nigerian dramas. That's all I want to say. I don't even want to give you too much, but when we're talking about stabbing somebody over beans not being soft enough or getting beaten or assault and all these different things, this is very much a real depiction of what happens in some of these dramas. Now, as far as the marriages, y'all are gonna have to let me know about that. I have not experienced that, but let's keep watching. Okay. Now, obviously, this is inspired by Jubilee, and this is called Face to Face, and I think this is like the Nigerian version of Jubilee. Okay.
Please signify if you agree with the prompt. Divorce is the only way out of an abusive marriage.
Okay, divorce is the only way out of an abusive marriage. Okay, the only word I don't like in this, and you already know what I'm gonna say, is only. Only is a very strong word, and it's hard to define exactly what an abusive marriage constitutes, right? We could be talking emotional abuse, we could be talking physical abuse, and on those 2 different scales of abuse, you have different levels of what an abusive marriage could look like. Only is a strong word. I do think there are instances of abusive marriages where the best thing for you to probably do is to divorce that individual. But only is strong in the sense that I feel like people can grow out of that. There are sometimes other things that are happening within a marriage that can lead to this sort of abusive behavior, and you can really work and strive to mend those things, and hopefully that ends whatever abuse is happening, whether it's the woman committing abuse or the man committing abuse. But in extreme cases that are affecting your health, your wellness, the health of your children, probably best to, at the very least, separate yourself from that person and see if there's anything that you can do to remedy the situation. But I'm not going to say that divorce is not an acceptable option for people who are experiencing abuse within their marriage. Taylor?
Yeah, that's the difference between like saying only an option versus the only option.
Right.
If you say it is the only option, then you are excluding from possibility that an abusive marriage could become a non-abusive marriage after perhaps a period of separation, counseling, etc.
Yeah.
Not saying that that is a preferred option or that you shouldn't get a divorce if you're in an abusive situation, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. Therefore, I guess I'd have to disagree with this.
Yeah, and we have 3 agreeers so far, so let's see what they got to say. Oh,
I can't stand abusive marriage anymore. I've experienced coma good 3 times. I will advise separate, say like 2-3 years, 4 years, and see the both partner will adjust. If it does not work, go for divorce. Let everybody say, calm down. Then let's see who is the devil and who was the angel.
I don't believe that divorce is the only way to save a marriage personally, but if someone can abuse you in a relationship, if someone can lift their hand up to hit you, why are you married to that person? What are you doing there?
Can the disagreeers now speak?
Okay, divorce is not the only way out. Think back. It has not always been beating now. There were real good times. Think back about that good times. Think back on how you started. You would definitely find a loophole somewhere. I hate beating, but no one is a saint. You will not die inside that marriage. Amen. Go away. Stay separate.
The only reason I'm
Okay, interesting. Okay, so we're getting very differing answers on this. And I apologize. I don't know if these accents are too much, if you guys can actually understand what's being said here. I'm so used to the Nigerian accents within my life that this does not faze
Thank God
me.
there's captions, is all I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, I have no marker for that because I'm used to this. But so we have people who are saying, you know what, leave, do not withstand abuse. A woman who said she was put in a coma 3 times in her marriage. Yeah, I think that's time to leave. I think number 1 probably would have been the time that you leave whatever situation that is, or at the very least separate yourself from whatever that situation is. The other woman is seemingly more forgiving, saying that abuse can be sort of phasal in a marriage and you should separate from that person so that you don't lose your life, and then hopefully you can work through that within your marriage. Again, there's going to be very different people who view this in very different ways, and I do think it's about the level of abuse that you're experiencing and how consistent that abuse is, whether or not it's a long-standing pattern of abuse. And at the end of the day, everybody is going to make their own individual choice when it comes to whether or not you stay in that situation. I will say, when you tolerate things like that from people who make it their goal to abuse you, you can often signal to them that you will withstand more. So the abuse will escalate and escalate and escalate and escalate, because why? You say, oh, I'm going to stay in this marriage. Divorce is not an option for me. And they know that they have you in their back pocket for you to stay, because you're not going to go anywhere, because, you know, on a values level or some philosophical level, you believe that divorce is not an option to you. It's a way to reinforce that behavior in many instances. And you'll hear from a lot of victims of abuse that because they stayed, things escalated and continued to grow. Of course, everybody's going to be different, but there wouldn't be much of that me personally, that I would be willing to withstand within a relationship.
Yeah, you just hear her saying, like, think back on the good times. There's maybe a place for that if you're like engaged in ongoing counseling where there's been a lot of ownership of mistakes made or something like that. But that sounds more like an internalized sort of abusive, I've accepted this mindset where I'm just going to think on the good times, and that justifies me staying in an abusive relationship. I don't think that's the proper approach. If you're at the stage where you're thinking back on the good times, hopefully that's during a time where you guys are everything's out on the table, responsibility has been taken, and even there, like, it's just so dicey anytime there's abuse. It's such a hard thing to recover from. I think it's just a really slippery slope to be saying, well, I'm just going to think on the good times to try to get through it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been obviously listening to all these different debates on marriage and divorce. And of course, you guys have heard with Michael Knowles and Pearl that they just sat down, and Michael Knowles' stance, at least to the best of my knowledge, was no divorce under any circumstances. And I wonder if this is a circumstance that he would withstand within his marriage. And maybe they unpack that. You guys can let me know in the chat down below.
on this side is because of the word only. Divorce is not the only way, actually. Even legally, there's something called judicial separation, which means that you are legally allowed to stop cohabiting with this person for the reasons that you would ordinarily divorce that person. Because even when you go to the courts, the first thing they ask you as a legal practitioner is, have you advised the client on reconciliation? If there is any chance that the parties will reconcile, the court would stop that proceeding to tell you, go and reconcile. So divorce is not aimed at actually separating people. The whole concept of divorce happens when the marriage has broken down irretrievably. Simple. At the same time, there should also be attempts to protect the party being abused. There are laws that protect people. The Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. Lagos State has adopted the domestic violence law as well that can give you protective orders while you're separate from this person. And in this moment, it is left for that person to now prove that he is no longer a threat. Also, there's been so much focus on physical abuse. Abuse can be psychological, it can be sexual, it can be financial. It's not just the physical abuse.
This man is spitting. He's spitting, y'all. He knows what he's talking about. I love that. And yeah, I like that he made the distinction between going through a separation and going through a divorce. And I think if we are going to remark on the West and the rate of divorce within marriages, a lot of it is people are leaving situations that they could reconcile, but just don't want to put in the effort to reconcile them. And of course, we're talking right now about extreme cases of abuse within marriage. That's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about people who maybe fall out of love with their partner, or they don't like certain things about their partner, or they want to go off and cheat and have sort of like a frivolous experience with somebody else. And they decide that that's an irreconcilable difference within their marriage, when in fact, if you just put in some effort and decided to really hunker down and communicate and work on things, it probably wouldn't be an irreconcilable difference. But people are so easily leaving marriages now because we're sort of just told, you know, you can get married, but you can get divorced at any moment if you really want to. And I think we're leaving marriages for way smaller reasons than abuse within marriage. And I hope this conversation gets into that topic and doesn't stick to the extremes of what can happen within a relationship, because more often than not, it's not the extremes that are leading people to divorce, at least here in the West. I don't know about what's happening in Nigeria and what's leading people to divorce over there. Somebody's gonna have to fill me in on that in the chat down below. But here in the West, it is way smaller things than abuse that are leading to divorce. Okay.
The courts in one of the cases said a dropping water melts away the stone. It might be minor acts, which in themselves, they do not amount to reasons to divorce, but when you accumulate them, it amounts to reasons to divorce.
You know, one thing about Nigerians, I shared this on my Instagram, is Nigerians be so poetic in the way that they speak. He said it's the little drops of water that really, you know, just bite away at the stone, and it's little things that sort of combine to become bigger things. And I follow these two, I think they're both Nigerian guys, maybe West African guys. You'll know them as like Shits and Gigs on TikTok, and they have a whole podcast where they share little funny things, but there's a whole episode where they talk about the poetic things that Nigerians say, and I think it's hilarious. Like, instead of calling somebody stupid, they'll say, wisdom is chasing her, but she is faster. They are so good at like just so eloquently stating very, very simple things. It's so funny.
I love that. We're getting a crash course in Nigerian folklore and proverbs, as well as divorce law and more. So this is just a great bonus features of this episode.
Yeah, you know, we're stepping out of our typical culture here today.
Even the courts recognize that.
Okay. Let's hear from this dude.
My name is Fisayo. I'm 28. I'm a legal practitioner. I'm married and a year and 3 months now. I'm pro-divorce because I don't think divorce is a problem. I think divorce is rather a solution to a problem.
I'm just going to start with this. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, but I can't prefer a solution as to what anyone should do. I'm still quite young, but I'm going to say that at the end of the day, we've convinced ourselves that divorce is the cure-all answer to it. And it's really wild because based on the data, the people who have divorced, right, and gone into second and third marriages have way less chances of it succeeding. It's 67 for second marriages and 73 for third marriages. Even when we're not talking about abuse, people just think it's normal. People just think, I mean, it's degeneracy to society. The analogy I love to use is, imagine society like a body, like a human body, right? And the family is the cells of that society. When you begin to break it off, one by one, it causes, you don't know the effects. So saying divorce is just a cure-all excuse and normalizing it is like saying we shouldn't drink liquid because we have the chance of choking. It doesn't make sense.
Okay, whew, homeboy is passionate. He is very passionate about his stance on this. We could reel it back a little bit. We could walk it back a little bit. There's some really interesting things being stated here, and I do agree with much of what he said. Divorce is sort of becoming a cure-all if we look at the rates of divorce, especially here in the West, and people are deciding, you know what, the minute I'm unhappy or the minute he's not Prince Charming, I'm going to jump out of this marriage and I'm going to go to divorce, because it's been made pretty simple to go about that entire process, even though, you know, it's not always simple. You know, you've entered a legal agreement with somebody, and that brings in a lot of other dynamics when you choose to end that legal agreement that you've both chosen to undertake. But it's becoming easier and easier, and the rates are becoming higher and higher. Now, I think family is important, but that Also, we should teach people you got to put a lot of work in before entering the marriage. As much as we're entering divorce super easily, people are entering marriage too easily. Like, y'all need to slow down a little bit, get to know one another, talk about real life issues, talk about the future, what you guys see, all the different bumps in the road that you could meet to at least get somewhat of a comprehensive view, although you can't account for how somebody changes over time. But damn, as much as people are getting divorced easily, they're getting married easily. And I see that when people talk about the institution that is marriage, or their want to be married and their desire for that to be part of their life, they're not often talking about the relationship that they want in marriage. They're just saying, I want to be married. A lot of women will say, I want a ring on my finger. If y'all watch Love is Blind this season, you'll recognize this attitude immediately. If you watch The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, it's a ton of people who are entering these spaces and saying, I want to be married, but they're not asking themselves, what does my marriage look like? Who do I want to be married to? What does a healthy marriage mean for me? And I mean, watching 30 girls all vie for the attention in the marriage of one man should tell you that none of them are thinking about what they actually want in their life. They've just been given an option, and that option looks like a sparkly engagement ring, and they go, I want that, I want to be married. No wonder the divorce rate is so damn high. They just want to go through the process of being in a long-term committed relationship without actually understanding what that means. And, a lot of men do that too, or they might be pressured into making that decision for themselves. And y'all gotta wait a little bit. You don't want to enter a marriage that's not going to be healthy for you just to say that you're married. And maybe that's societal pressure, maybe that's personal pressure, but hold off a little bit. As much as y'all are divorcing too easily, you're getting married too easily too. You gotta wait on that.
I think the high divorce rates that we're seeing is less an indictment on the institution of marriage itself and more an indictment on the readiness of the people that are entering into those marriages, as well as the culture that is informing people's view of marriage and giving them a track, the failure of the culture to give people a track to find a successful long-term partner. And that's a great point about like Love is Blind and stuff. Like it's such a shallow view of your own, the significance of the decision that you would make to entrust your entire life to someone, that you would outsource that to a TV show. Now, of course, we know it's like television or whatever, but just the flippancy that kind of communicates about the topic of marriage and about finding love. We could call it finding love, finding a long-term commitment, a lifelong committed relationship. That is a weighty thing. And it's weighty because of, yes, marriage as an institution is a thing that deserves serious weight and consideration and should be something that is revered and held in high regard in our culture. And I think that that's a lot of what this young guy was speaking to. But also it has massive implications. It's the biggest decision probably that you will ever make in your entire life. And so that in and of itself means that you should have this selection process extremely well thought out and extremely well vetted. And when you reach the point of committing to someone like that, that should be one of the most careful decisions that you ever make. And those two things go hand in hand: the seriousness of the institution of marriage, but as well as the seriousness of the decisions for you personally to commit to something like that. So I understand that we have the high divorce rates and such, but I think, again, that is an indictment more on the readiness of the people.
Yeah, literally the biggest personal decision you'll make, the biggest career decision you'll ever make, the biggest legal commitment you will ever make in your life. And people are just like, well, let's get married. Look, y'all need to chill a little bit. Chill out. Okay.
What happened to dialogues? What happened to having a conversation? Because before the two of you got married, you courted, you saw those signs. What happened? You were in love. You just ignored the signs. Continue ignoring the signs now. Why did you have to? No, hold on. Except you didn't see the sign, and nobody can say they did not see even the slightest bit of signs that this person could be abusive. I have been there. I have been abused. What did I do? I called my partner. What's going on? What's happening? Why is this thing happening? We had the conversation. You can't just say, oh, divorce is going to solve the issue just like that. It doesn't. Okay, you get divorced, and then what?
A friend of mine.
Okay. I'm happy that he was able to resolve the abuse that he was experiencing within his partnership by having a conversation with his partner. That is a signal that maybe this was just a smaller side effect of something bigger going on within the relationship, and they were able, at least according to his account, to be able to communicate their ways out of that. Is he then advocating that a partnership that can't communicate their way out of it is meant to just sit there because the woman or the man saw the signs and now they have to deal with the abuse that comes from their lack of recognition of those signs or their choice to ignore those signs? And if so, to what service? Like, what purpose does it serve to the health of society to remain in a marriage that is personally abusive towards you and that is ruining your health and wellness? I can understand telling somebody that, staying in a marriage in bad times and rough times and sickness and in health, this is the vow that we make, is important because you teach yourself resilience, you teach yourself how to communicate, you teach yourself how to see your way out of issues and barriers, and you become stronger on the other end of it. But if you're in a situation where abuse is continuous and even, getting worse over time, what good does it do for society for you to remain married to an individual who's ruining your health, your mind and body? I just don't see where this becomes a net positive, even if you are somebody who 100% believes in the institution of marriage. I just don't get what that argument would be, to be honest.
Was he starved to death just because of beans? That the beans was not soft enough for a man to eat. The argument started. Okay, let me go and cook it more. He said, why is it taking so long? Just for the woman to say, it's beans. You allow it to soft, and he said it's too strong. Bah! Started punching the woman. She retaliated to save her life. The next thing the man did, he picked a bottle beside him. A pregnant woman with 3 months child in her womb. Before she rushed to the hospital, she passed away. And my name is Alice Bedudo. I'm 54 years old. I'm a divorcee of 11 years now. Hitting every time. Little thing a man will provoke, little time, little thing I will provoke. People say marriage is adorable. It's not enduring. As long as there is no hitting, no abuses, both from the husband or from the wife.
I feel like the topic they've been using is too subtle for you guys. So you have a child? Male
Yes,
or
I
female?
do. Male.
You have children, sorry, male or female?
Male, female.
Beautiful. Okay, so we've been talking about physical abuse since. Let's say, for instance, now your husband sexually abused your daughter. Are you going to stay with him?
God forbid.
God forbid. Yeah. But it happens. These are things that happen. Will you stay with him after?
First and foremost, let me tell you the truth. I would definitely want to find out that thing.
No, if your daughter come and meet you, start asking her, is it true or not? If your husband sexually abused your child or your wife sexually abused your child, and you find out it's true, what are you going to do?
You know the beautiful thing about that question? I'm going to consider priorities. If I leave my spouse, all right, what consequence do you think will be greater? Leaving that marriage is not going to reverse the emotional trauma. If I'm a mother and I didn't have any education whatsoever, I don't have a 9-to-5 job, I don't make any form of money at all, and I know I need that man for financial assistance, I'm going to say, look, I'm prioritizing my daughter's or my son's future ahead of this abuse.
Okay. See, this is where we're like, okay, you're gonna come here and defend marriage and be anti-divorce, but you're gonna advocate that a child withstand sexual abuse because you have such strong opinions about whether or not you leave a marriage. To me, it's where, this argument, it's not standing, it's not holding water anymore. And he's saying, think about the long-term consequences, how this affects the future of your daughter or your sons, how it affects you financially. I don't know what a future is for a child that is being repeatedly sexually abused whilst having two parents, a father who's perpetrating the act and a mother who is well aware of the act, which then makes her, an accomplice to her being sexually abused? What type of future is there for a child who's going to remain in that sort of systemic abuse cycle within her family? There is none. So as a mother, even if you are in the absolute worst financial situation. You have no education. You get your child out of that situation in whatever way you possibly can. That is your duty as a mother. Your duty is to your child's health and wellness. Even if that means you no longer have financial support. That's just, to me, that's nuts to say that you should stay in a situation like that and have your child withstand abuse for the sake of what? Like, I'm not quite getting what the argument is here, because to me, what is much worse is allowing the child to remain in that situation, regardless of what lies on the other end of the divorce.
Because it already happened. It's a bad thing, right?
Well, I mean,
but it already
if
happened.
you divorce,
but I'm
like, it's still,
prioritizing that future.
there are countries that if you divorce,
help.
there will be financial compensation.
Let
So
me
if you know you're
help.
going to get
But it's
financial,
not always sure.
if you know you're
It's not
going,
always sure.
if you know you are going to get financial compensation from divorce,
The
are you going to do it?
You never know.
You shouldn't
If you
get
know.
divorced
No,
in
you only
situations
know when
like
you're in
that.
the divorce
The reason
process.
who is going to help the man? Like, the man needs help, obviously.
course, Samuel, the help that he needs.
What do you mean? That's your husband.
I'm sorry,
That's
you're
your-
sexually
that's your
assaulting my
responsibility.
child and you're telling me I should be
that is
responsible for him?
Yes, you.
Bro, what?
As a
The man
wife,
should be in
as a
jail.
wife, you should be responsible for
Why? What
your. Has it been like that? Did you know that he has
After he
been like
assaults
that?
my daughter, after
Something is
interrogating
definitely
him, have you
wrong.
been like this? Is this your first time?
So
Seriously,
putting him in jail, how does that?
I'll be at peace.
I'm gonna be honest. If I married a man and he was abusing my child, he's going under the house. I'll be so honest with you right now. I will help him under the house.
Knowing that whoever assaulted my daughter,
Are you sure you'll be at peace, or you're just imagining that?
Let me address a lot of issues that have actually been raised here, most of which border on criminal allegations. If a man rapes a minor, that's a very grievous crime, regardless of whether he's the father or not. The right steps that should be taken, because you're saying the emotional abuse has happened, you're right. But that daughter will grow up knowing that the mother condoned it. That's a greater emotional abuse. So the best thing the mother can do at that point is to do everything to protect the child, which includes making sure that the father, if you're not going to at least report the father, you take the child away from that environment. But you can also, like I said, if you divorce this man, you have a legal claim to financial support that it would be binding on him. So you saying if you leave, it would, no, that doesn't happen.
It's not always like that.
It is
always like that.
It depends. And like I said, once you're able to prove certain things in courts, and when you're talking about if the man is not
we
even,
talk a lot about corruption.
Hold on.
He's allowed to
The
talk.
man is not even, for some reason, convicted of that crime, because obviously the burden of proof is really high in cases like that. You have recourse to so many, like I said, the law is there to protect. A lot of times we just don't test the law in the courts, simply because we have this ideology that, it doesn't work.
This man is the voice of reason. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad. I think it's Fiseo is his name. Fiseo, thank you so much for being here and speaking some sense into people. Now, in Nigeria, there is a lot of corruption. I don't know how that affects family law and the court system and divorce law, but there is most definitely a lot of corruption within the country. Now, I like that he's saying a lot of people don't trust the law to be tested, but you do need to test it in these instances and at least try if you're going to be in a situation that's going to be straining you financially in the wake of what has happened to your family. So I stand by that. As a mother, you need to separate the child from the situation. And he's even granting their argument that, like, for some reason, you're not going to report this guy to the law. He's saying even if you don't report the individual that is committing this act of abuse, at the very least, your obligation is to separate your child from the situation and to make sure that this is not committed again against them. And I mean, the fact that he even has to say that.
It works, it just takes time,
But
honestly.
that does not mean that they are divorced.
Yeah.
Yes, he asked me that question, and it shocked me. I want to be sincere. He has answered. He has said exactly what I wanted to say. Separating that child from the father is the most important thing at that moment. So, but that does not mean that you are divorcing your husband.
If this type of incident really happen, and you find out it is true, would you still marry that man?
I will still be with my husband, but
God forbid.
Listen, I will still be with my
A man that will
husband.
sleep with me and sleep with my daughter.
if I am the child, I'll arrest you and my father.
A man that God with
It's interesting. Okay, so clearly I'm gonna imagine that she may have some sort of religious tie to marriage and divorce, and that might be what's holding her away from wanting to divorce her husband. I would imagine there's some sort of greater hierarchy, at least in her mind, at play, where if you are divorced, there's some sort of withstanding punishment that follows your soul outside of life. That's the only thing that would make sense to me as to why somebody would defend staying in a marriage with somebody who is abusing children. And hopefully she's going to get into that and express why that may be the case for her. But she clearly seems to have sort of like a keystone in her worldview that says divorce is not happening under any circumstances, even the most vicious of circumstances. She's refusing. So I imagine she believes that's going to impact her soul in the next life or something like that.
Yeah, it definitely seems like that's a fixed point of reasoning for her, and like that all of her thought process extends from the a priori assumption that divorce is not an option, never an option. And for me, from a Christian point of view, it's kind of curious because there is provision made for divorce on the grounds of adultery, and I mean, in this hypothetical situation, which thank God this is all hypothetical, although I'm sure these things do happen, but that is an egregious form of adultery, one of the worst imaginable. So you would have grounds to leave the husband in that case, even under a Christian framework, if that's what's preventing her. But even one of the first things she said was to, like, when the hypothetical was presented to her, she said, well, how do I know that it really happened, or what, she kind of expressed doubt, or like, we should give the husband the benefit of the doubt in this case, which is, again, just sort of a red flag. And there's this idea that's even communicated in the New Testament of like the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. And the spirit of the commitment that you make in marriage is that till death do us part. It is that, like, yeah, no matter what, like, we're gonna persevere. But like, if you're taking that only on like literal grounds and saying like until death do us part in no circumstance will I ever, then I think that can get you into trouble in real life. And that's how you can start to rationalize unthinkable situations and staying in unthinkable abusive situations and such, just because, well, according to the letter of the law, or according to this like a rigid dogmatic belief that I have about marriage in this case, then I'm going to organize my reasoning after that indisputable fact, when really it's more about the spirit of the commitment that you're making. And clearly this husband in this hypothetical would be totally violating the spirit of the commitment as well as the letter. So I just don't understand what her logic would be, and it appears to be that there is no logic, that it is sort of like we talk about ideology a lot. This is an example of like a Christian oriented rigid dogmatic ideology that is producing a negative outcome that's actually inconsistent with the spirit and letter of Christianity. So that's kind of how I'm viewing it from a Christian lens, if that provides any helpful context. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's going to create way more harm than whatever thing she thinks she's servicing in her choice to not be divorced from this man.
There too. If I'm a lawyer, I would sentence him to death. What were you even thinking of? Oh God.
Yes,
Let
I
me
will
give
still
such
be
a
with my
man.
husband. But let me start very well and talk. See, do you know that time the man is already separated from me? That does not mean I'm divorced from my husband. But that time, my own mind too is not even at peace with him. Because that is a devilish act. No, and try to take him to jail or whatever.
Yeah.
That's if you report him.
Yeah, that's if there's a report made.
Yes. No, there will definitely be a report.
Oh, that is going to.
No. This is
Yeah,
just the
they
fact.
should.
The man will definitely be reported. But that does not feel mean that I will divorce my husband. I want you to get that fact. I will definitely stay away from him for the period where he's going to see this punishment.
If you actually are okay with that person doing that thing and you still want to be with that person, the law doesn't have an issue with that. What I appreciate that she said was that she would take steps to ensure that the man is brought to book for whatever crime he has committed, and the child is protected. Under, I think it's section 15(2)(c) of the matrimonial clauses, or 2B, it talks about adultery. And it says, where the respondent has persistently and willfully committed adultery, and the petitioner finds it intolerable to live with that person. If you've condoned an act and the man doesn't do it again, you cannot divorce on that once it is proven that you condoned it.
That's very interesting. I'm learning a lot here, and yeah, it's very interesting. So she's saying I'll separate, but I'm just not going to divorce him, which I think just further reinforces what we seem to know about this woman, that she just does not want to go through the process of divorce, and there's probably an amount of shame and also just religious ideology that reinforces this idea that she will never get divorced no matter what. And you know what? I agree with what Fiseo said, is that, you know, as long as the child is separated and this guy is kept away from committing other heinous crimes like this, if you want to be Boo Boo the Fool and still be married to him, then by all means be Boo Boo the Fool. Go be Nicki Minaj and be, you know, married to the guy who has, you know, a sexual assault charge and is an offender. If that's what you want to be, you can go ahead and be that. More power.
Real quick, hearing her lay that out, it's like, I can see maybe where there's an argument to be made that it's like, out of my commitment to the institution of marriage itself, that it's not a referendum on this man or my desire to stay with this man in particular, but it is a referendum on, or an evidence of, my desire to sort of stay true to my commitment and honor the institution of marriage itself. So yes, I'll separate from him. I'll make sure that the abused is separated and that he is, you know, I'll testify against him, whatever. Like, I can see the logic in that. But again, I would say that is going beyond what Christianity is asking you to do, and really going beyond, you're taking on a burden that I don't think you necessarily need to bear in that situation. And I'm saying this as somebody who does have a high view of marriage and does think that, generally speaking, come out of marriages too flippantly. But if there ever were a case where you would be justified in going through a divorce, surely this situation would meet that criteria.
Yeah.
So I think she's just kind of going beyond what is required of her, just by simple rationality and even faith.
Yeah, what a weight that she's placed on herself to carry if she were ever in a situation like that. It's just like an unnecessary burden to be placed on you. It's very interesting.
Die for me. I've cleansed all my sins. I have been taught that forgiveness should be the key in everything. Assuming such a thing happens to me, I'll go gather. I'll feel like tearing him out of my face. I am not going to divorce my husband. I will watch and see that he suffers very well and get to realize evil he has done. And my parents taught me that divorce is not an option in marriage. For better, we died here.
We would appreciate if you subscribe to the channel. We're trying to hit 50,000 subscribers.
What I can say I value about that perspective that she has and how strongly she holds that perspective is that I imagine if you go into life with that view of marriage, you are going to be extremely choosy about the person that you choose to get married with, because there is no disbanding of that marriage. And at the very least, it will teach young women to be extremely particular when it comes to the man they choose, and hopefully finding a man with good values. What it does not account for is the failure in your particularity and your lack of often, expanded judgment on who people are versus who they can be. And it doesn't account for the fact that people can change, and things that you could have never seen or accounted for can then enter your marriage, and it can become an abusive situation or an illegal situation with what we're discussing here. So, I value that it makes people think twice before choosing their partner, but that's about all I can find as far as value in that opinion.
In the first quarter of this year, divorce should be normalized.
Divorce should be normalized. Okay, let's see who raises their hands. Okay, we got 3 people. Again, normalize is such a strong word. It's like the same way I view when they said, it's the only option when it comes to an abusive situation. Normalized insinuates to me that it can become sort of flippant. Oh yeah, we got divorced. He wasn't doing what I asked of him. He doesn't do the laundry every day, or we got in a fight about the kids and I divorced him. normalized is such a strong word. I think it should be destigmatized, and that we should be able to have good conversations about divorce without it being a subject matter that is so full of shame and judgment attached to him. But normalized is a bit strong. But we'll put it in the, we'll make a poll for you guys.
Yeah,
Divorce
so far
is not
looks like, oh, sorry.
No worries.
80% of you are saying disagree. And I agree too. Just think about the word normalized or norms. And the norm should not be divorce. The norm should be a healthy marriage that endures. And to the degree that we can have a high view of marriage as a culture and incentivize people to treat that choice with proper weight going into it and then staying with it, I think that's a good thing. And we know the positive outcomes that follow for that, both in terms of like children, communities, and in personal lives and relationships. And I can say as a married person, like it challenges you and makes you grow in ways that you just, when you're in a committed relationship, that you do not exist outside of that level of commitment. But all of that has to be balanced against the reality that we are human beings, human nature is fallen. People are going to do things that violate that commitment one way or another. And we need to make sure that people are protected from being put in perpetually abusive situations. So I agree with you. I mean, it's a long way to say, like, I agree with you that there shouldn't be stigma. We should have grace toward people who are going through divorce, but also the threshold should be very, very high. And we should have a deep reverence for this type of commitment as well.
Yeah. Normalized too strong.
The problem. You have to come and prove to the court that these things happen before the court grants you a divorce. So if someone has gone through these circumstances in life and has decided they are no longer willing to go through those circumstances, why should the society force or stigmatize them for making that choice? I feel that is hypocritical because there's something they say, it's the person that wears the shoe that knows where it is.
The person that wears the shoe that knows where it is. I told you, Nigerians have sayings. If you ever need a saying, call a Nigerian person.
I don't think the society should stigmatize people who are divorced.
Because they have not been in that shoe that you are. When I first separated from my husband, we started with separation. We separated for about seven times before I found out that if care is not taken, one person head will enter 6 feet. So it is better for us to stay alive, to watch our children group, train our children, nurture them in the will of the Lord. So many people said a lot of things. Church came in, villagers came in, family came in. You can imagine the trauma.
And something that I find really unfortunate is that the stigma doesn't even stay with the man, it's the woman. The man is most likely free to just continue his life like it never happened. It's the woman, and I understand because obviously she has children and those children are attached to her. But at the same time, I think the society should be able to see through what that woman has gone through, and rather than stigmatize her for her decision, have empathy for the situation she has found herself in.
And I agree with him, especially based off the example you just got from that woman. She's saying, I was married to a man. He put me in a coma 3 separate times. We tried separation 7 different times. And then at one point, something broke in me where I decided it's best for one of us to stay alive. And the person who's probably going to be, dead in the situation is her. So she's like, well, let's have both of us stay alive. I'm going to separate from this person and I'm still going to take care of my children and train them. And she's clearly religious. So she says, I want to bring them up in our religion. Yet, typically, and especially within Nigerian culture, she's going to be the one judged for having gone through a divorce, when if her story is true and we're taking her at her word, it is very much the husband's fault for what she was forced to withstand within her marriage. Now, when you translate this to the West, we're in a very different situation. I know, like, people are throwing out stats like 80% of divorce are being initiated by women. How many of them are really in situations this drastic that warrant divorce? I don't know, but at the very least, it's women deciding, I'm unhappy, I'm going to leave this situation. Because divorce has become so frivolous and, people can just go and get it, then it almost reinforces like a stigma to be placed on you for going through this whole process of a long-term committed relationship and then ending it with 80% of women being the ones who make that choice. So it's very different when you compare culturally the way these two different things are looked after. And when he explains it on a legal level, He's saying if you want to get divorced in Nigeria, you have to come and explain what's happening within your marriage. You have to point out who's accountable for what's happening within your marriage. And you have to give real valid reasons for why you cannot reconcile the situation within your marriage. In the United States, you can just go, sign a paper. If it gets a little bit, worse than that, and you have to argue back and forth over assets and stuff, you get the lawyers involved and all these different things. It's a different situation when you don't have to prove fault or take accountability for what's happening within your relationship. Now, I don't know how I feel about that. Should you have to explain why you want to make a legal decision for yourself and why you want to disband a marriage? I don't know, but I can certainly see the positives in having to substantiate why you want to leave a marriage. I just don't know that it's the government's job or position to ask that of you. And that's something that I contend with and go back and forth with. And, at baseline, why I'm not a huge fan of marriage, because I don't like the idea that the government gets to know who I love and who I want to be in a long-term relationship with anyways. So I have a lot of thoughts on this subject, and I go back and forth on this idea of marriage and the different ways that it's implemented and how it shows up in different cultures. But that's interesting that you have to go and actually substantiate. You have to make your case to a court about why you want to make this legal decision.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more to that, I think it's interesting how the layers, because marriage is a very layered thing. There's the family layer, there's a layer of your individual relationship, there's your families, the community that you're a part of has a stake in it, society as a whole has a stake in it, the government does have a stake in the institution of marriage. And now we can argue how big that stake should be, but just in terms of nuclear families or child rearing or outcomes, etc., it is something that the government would have a stake in and be wise to incentivize. But again, because of all the layers to it, those lines get very blurry. And I think when we isolate just the legal aspect of it, you're missing out on some of the other elements of marriage that make it make it what it is. And that is a very much more holistic picture that I think we're not really talking about marriage when we've reduced it down to just one simple element.
Yeah, it's difficult. It goes back and forth, and there's so many different levels to the conversation. I do have to interject here. Frostoss sent a $50 super chat with just a little #1 sticker on it. Thank you very much. We appreciate you for that super chat. Yeah, I am all for long-term committed relationships, men and women getting together, having children. For my personal life, what I see is having that person. We're going to have children. We're going to be in a long-term committed relationship. We're going to share finances. We're going to do everything that married couples do. I just don't right now see the reason to go and sign a piece of paper that says we are legally bound to one another. And that's where I'm at currently.
Generally, marriage is a contract. At least under the law, it's a contract. Under religion, it's an oath or a vow. Like every other contract, you can decide to pull out. Then you should be allowed to. I don't see how that is a problem to any other person.
I believe that if a couple goes into marriage knowing that divorce is an option, nobody will want to spoil the marriage knowing that divorce can happen. That's basically it for me.
It's not a big deal. If you try to make it work, it does not work. Oh, girl or boy, put the paper down, sign them, rest your head. Marriage is not by force.
Candidate Sagrias, now speak.
Okay.
Where did we get lost in society to think it should be normalized? You made vows on that wedding day. You made vows. Now, if anybody can divorce willy-nilly, what is the point?
His energy is very abrasive, and it's very interesting that the energy is abrasive from somebody so young when he's speaking to these senior pillars in a shared community who have been through the marriage process, some of whom are still married, some of whom are divorced. You have a woman who's saying I was put in a coma 3 times and tried to separate from him 7 times, and to so ardently defend that divorce is never the option to somebody who's withstood so much maybe speaks to the fact that he might not have seen as much as these people have seen. He maybe has not experienced as much as these people have seen. And he needs to calm his energy down a little bit because he's coming very strong towards people who have had very real life experiences and is seemingly defending something that he's yet to even fully understand or recognize the scope of.
Children are the beginning of empires. Now, if you're going to be shaping them and giving them the example that vows are just protocol, till death do us part is just protocol, I wonder what kind of parent you are. Okay, let me ask you a question. If you got cheated on, right, and your wife divorces you, right, are you going to be comfortable with the fact that she just did it because she knows she can divorce you anytime?
Why did I cheat in the first place?
She
Why
cheated
she
on
cheated?
you. Yeah.
I would turn back to this kid and I would say, let me ask you a question. Let's say you are married to a woman, you have multiple children, multiple young children who are watching your relationship, and this woman is beating you over the head every day. She's cheating on you. She's screaming obscenities. She no longer accepts, I guess, the religion that you've both taken your vows of marriage on, and she is inflicting this on your children day in and day out. What's a healthier situation for the children that are now living with you? Is it to stay in the marriage because your vows mean something, and that's the lessons that you want to teach your kid, that your vows mean that you withstand being beaten, you withstand a lack of values, you withstand cheating, you're showing them what an unhealthy relationship looks like every single day and saying we stay in this because of our vow? Or is it healthier that you teach kids that yes, we make vows with good intentions and we try to stick to those vows, but if they're not working out for us and if they're not creating healthy situations for us, and that unhealthy situation is then being inflicted on our children, we do what's best for our children. He's defending marriage as if that's somehow going to be a healthier outcome for the children involved, when in reality, children viewing an unhealthy situation is one of the worst things that you can bestow upon them. You can still teach them how important vows are and how important integrity is and standing to your word is, but my goodness, in a situation where that word has been used against you and is then inflicting abuse on you and your children, I think we can change the wording and we can get out of that situation. Oh my
Real quick,
goodness.
we got a $50 super chat from Frost Toss. Looks like he forgot to write his message on the last one. So thanks for sending another one. I don't think you had to do that, but thank you. It says, forgot to write the message. It would be simpler if they just argue about the breakup of long-term committed relationships rather than divorce of marriage.
Yeah, it's because we get caught in marriages, but what really marriages are long-term commitments, any way you slice it. And there are people who are in long-term committed relationships, who have children, who have been together for decades and never signed the paper. And we don't view those people to be married. We view them to be something, I guess, lesser than people who chose to sign the paper, which doesn't really quite make sense to me, which is why I think we should expand the conversation to just breaking up long-term committed relationships with children and what that looks like. But because Nigeria is a very religious country, I think marriage is sort of the pillar of this conversation for that very reason.
Yes. Are you going to be comfortable with the fact that she just did it because she knew that she could divorce you anytime?
She can't do that.
Are you gonna really have
She
that?
can't do that, actually. Yeah, legally, you can't cheat and then bring a case to court to say I want to divorce because I cheated.
Can I ask you a question?
Uh-huh.
You got married to a woman that is stronger than you.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
Every little thing, she threatens you that she's going to bully you, she's going to bully. Every time she bully you, your father comes in, the church comes in, the uncles come in, she still remains. Will you still go ahead to marry that woman?
There's something in dating, right, and age that relates to each other. When you're dating at the right age, you build emotional intelligence. So when you know that a case is gonna come like that, when you know there's a probability of that, right, you create contingency plans, right? Now that contingency plans might not be divorcing, but there are other methods.
Shouldn't be a normal thing.
Well, I hope his judgment is 100% intact and he never makes a mistake in his dating life and choosing somebody where he doesn't quite see the red flags and they pop up later. I hope that the best for somebody with this mentality, but somebody who thinks so confidently and has such audacity oftentimes is wrong when they make choices.
Take a look at our society currently, for example, how people are just diving into divorce with any little discomfort. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. People no longer want to manage, not even manage, like build. Now that people are saying we should not stigmatize, they should stigmatize them. Because if you don't stigmatize them, that is why they will feel very free.
Exactly.
Your husband just raised his voice at you a little bit, or the wife did not cook soup for you the way you like it, you just get a divorce. They should stigmatize them. People will say, oh, it's only the women who get stigmatized. No, people no longer want to go into relationships with single fathers anymore. they are being stigmatized. So it is good. They should continue stigmatizing them. Maybe that one will help them to think, okay, at least if I cannot fight for my marriage, what about the people that will be insulting me that I couldn't stay in marriage, or the people that will be saying, oh, I carry children for her, they know if he dates me. Okay.
I agree with him. He just lacks nuance. I do think these people who are flippantly leaving relationships should be, it should be stigmatized to some extent. But the law and just like the legality of it all is meant to support the minority, not the majority. Okay, so even if you argue the majority of people are leaving marriages very flippantly and it's because of small little things that build up over time and they don't want to be married anymore, the law exists to protect those who are going through the abuses, who are dealing with all this negativity and an unhealthy situation. That is why the law exists. So sure, you can stigmatize people who are flippantly leaving long-term relationships, but should that same stigma be doled out to people who are leaving situations that they very well should be leaving? No. So just a little bit of nuance, just a little sprinkle of nuance.
Yeah. There's the lack of nuance, and then there's, like you said, it's just like the extremes. Like, it seems like we're either in the ditch of you should get married and never get divorced, or marriage is this whatever commitment and you should leave it whenever you want. Why can't we just stay out of both of those ditches and say, well, society, our laws should incentivize, society should incentivize from a cultural standpoint, staying on the road, right? And not getting on either ditch. We should have a way to incentivize long-term committed relationships that are good for the people involved, good for the children involved, good for society, community, etc. And but we should also make provision for the extreme circumstances that would require someone to get out of a commitment like that. It seems pretty straightforward and common sense solution, and yet it's like, if you're anti, then you've got to come with the most broad examples, and if you're pro, you have to come with paint everything with the same brush. So just a sad case of black nuance, which I guess makes for a good video where people are debating these things, but not so much in working it out in real life.
Right. And Faseo said something interesting that I didn't get to touch on. He said, if legally, you can't just go cheat on somebody and then come to the court and say, I cheated, I want to get a divorce. Apparently in Nigeria, you cannot do that. I did not know that that was the case. In the US, you can get divorced for, far less than that.
People are like just jumping into divorce, right?
They are. Look at the society.
Do you also believe that people are also just jumping into marriages? Mostly married are married. Yeah, so those people that are married, should they be allowed to divorce or not?
This is the reason why some churches will make you go through series of what they call
counseling.
We are talking about like the whole world. You can't just talk about like just churches.
No, I'm telling you that if all churches, or if they can say, if you want to get married, go through the process of counseling. They can normalize that. Since you want to say they should throw marriage away.
Okay, see,
instead of throwing marriage away,
that actually makes more sense, because like if you want to divorce, you need to go to.
But we are not talking about that right now. We are talking about
still
divorce.
The same thing.
We are not talking about that right now.
Divorce have like, you have like a long list of things you need to go through before you can divorce. When you have been or you fall out of love.
Some people just divorce because of
for the slightest reason, especially the divorce.
I kind of like this. I like where the conversation was going, although it seems they're not going to allow it to go in the direction. He's saying if legally we have hoops you have to jump through in order to get divorced, legally we should have hoops you have to jump through in order to get married. Agree. Because y'all can go to Vegas and get some dude dressed up as Elvis to marry you guys and then go sign the license or whatever. And then you are legally bound to one another. No hoops, no nothing that you have to jump through. It would be interesting to have a series of little, what do we call them? Little things you have to jump over, little barriers you have to get through in order to get married, because you should put a little test on yourselves, legally, personally, values-based, to make sure you're ready to go there. And if you truly are hell-bent on the idea of getting married, your relationship should be able to withstand whatever test it takes in order to go through the process of legally binding yourselves to one another. If you're gonna make divorce all difficult, make the damn marriage difficult.
I like that too. And to me, my mind goes to like the example of preventative medicine, like how much dysfunction, how much millions and billions of dollars of like waste in the medical industry from prescriptions, from other, treatments and surgeries and stuff could have not been spent if people were more conscious of their health going into it. The actual cases are severe enough, but if before you're going into life, either you're not disincentivized from making a bunch of bad decisions. And I think before you enter into a commitment, you should have to count the cost. There's a parable that Jesus tells about a guy who wanted to build a building and said, if you don't count the cost before you build the building and determine whether or not you have enough resources to finish constructing it, you're going to be laughed at, and then your life's going to be a mockery. And I think that the same holds true whenever we're talking about entering into a commitment. You know, we talk about like the contract of marriage, and that's really what it is as well, is like an oath that you're making, a promise that you're making to that other person before witnesses, because society and your family and everybody does have stake in that promise that you're making. So yeah, we should qualify you before you are allowed to make that commitment. And you, of everybody, should have the greatest level of concern about your own qualification to follow through on the commitment that you're making, as well as the person that is on the other side of that contract with you. But for some reason, we are just not thinking about marriage in that light.
If I was a leader, I'd be making rules for everything. Y'all gotta go through tests to get married. Y'all gotta go through tests to get divorced. You guys gotta go through tests to have kids. And then obviously I don't agree with this actual amount of government intervention, but I'm just thinking on a philosophical level, it'd be better if people had to withstand certain tests.
Yeah, think about like you have to get a credit check to take out a loan, but like how much more consequence to society is somebody getting married and or having kids than like taking out a loan. And yet we put much more rigorous of a process to vet people who are just taking out some money than people who are actually going to bring a child into the world or make a commitment like marriage.
Yup.
It's wild.
It's wild. Yeah, but if the government made their parent test or whatever, it would be like, what if your kid says that they're trans? Would you allow them to transition? And you'd have to mark like yes on a document or something. Be ridiculous. Obviously, I'm not calling for real enforcement of this, but it's an idea.
Your soul be hammering on like us with so much pleasure. I don't know. Maybe it's coming from a divorced home. Maybe he has lived with those who are from a divorced home, and he has seen one-hand experience of what it is there. All this gaga, eating and all that stuff.
I'm from a very stable family, and I've not really seen or experienced divorce firsthand. But I've seen people that should have gotten divorced, so that is one of the main reasons why I'm here. I believe divorce should be normalized, not something that people have to go through lots of process just to get to.
You people think you can just walk into court and
exactly what I'm saying. You can't just divorce like that.
That is not. You cannot even divorce within 2 years without the leave of court. And what that means is that you have to first ask the court, "Can I divorce?" And there are grounds: rape, bestiality. Sometimes, if you marry within bloodlines or if you marry within relatives. Let's say you marry someone that was insane, someone that was not capable. There's very strict requirements.
But this is
within 2 years.
They are venturing divorce because they feel it's normal, because it's normalized. It's easy for them to bring.
That's what I'm saying. Now it's easy for them to bring it, but they still have to prove.
You can't just wake up and look at your wife, look at your husband that you love so much. You went to the altar and wear a ring, dance, do this. Said, you know they do again. That there is something that will make you to do that thing. I would say it's not normal to divorce, and it's not also good to stay in abusive marriage. Mm-hmm. Before a man or a woman would do that, they are cutting to this place. I will not say divorce is good and it's sweet. It's not sweet too. It's very bitter. Oh, I don't know how to put it. Look at it back and front before you do it, because it's not rice and beans.
And that's a very important statement there. It's not rice and beans, okay? Because it's not simple. And I think sort of flippantly, the very anti-divorce people are viewing divorce as if like people are throwing it out at parades like candy and everybody wants a divorce and I'm getting married just so I get divorced, or I'm on my third marriage, yay. I don't think people get married with the intent to get divorced. I think people get married thinking this is going to be the relationship that takes them for the rest of their lives, and then they get a rude awakening somewhere in the middle, or they realize that they can't deal with the situation that they've been placed in. It's more important that we put in the work before getting married, but for people who have already made that decision and realize they made the wrong one, I don't see that we can really place an enforcement on whether or not they get to leave that situation. Now, as much as I would love to test people before they get married and divorced, I don't think that is the job of the government. And I don't think that they can, impose that on people. And I don't think we would want our current government to be able to impose that on us before we make decisions that affect our lives. So it's difficult because I can understand the way that divorce rates are going up and people are leaving marriages just because they feel some type of way or they don't want to be there anymore or they're, unhappy in a very superficial sense. But do I feel like I should rob a person of being able to make that choice for themselves? I don't know. I can truly tell you I do not know.
If you believe in love and the two of you actually really love each other, there is nothing you cannot work out.
It is not only abusive marriage that can make somebody divorce.
Yes.
It's not even on the top 3 or 5.
You don't need to reach that
It's
far
not
to
even
impact
there.
it.
It's not even up there. 8th of January, 2024. I think that's when it was released. It was a Forbes list. Domestic violence is there, but there are things way above. I'm not saying it's to discredit domestic violence.
I think finances is, number one reason why people get divorced. Yeah.
We have lack of commitment there, lack of education when your spouse is illiterate. We have substance abuse, so many other things, right? Domestic abuse was either 7th or 9th. So I was just thinking we could treat the other things instead of focusing on violence and all.
There are so many things. So many.
Mary.
Communication, lack of communication. It can cause divorce. Make a marriage so.
That one is worse.
See, why just have to say
It
that?
is so simple. It only has to do with dialogue. If you're saying you pass through beating, maybe you don't pass through the one that passed.
That's not a trouble.
No, but I just want to tell you.
She said she don't go for that.
Marriage
That's actually an insane thing to say to somebody. You said you've gone through beatings. Maybe you haven't gone through the beatings that I've gone through. Is an insane thing to say to somebody. I don't even know what else to say about that. I think we're going to do one more prompt here because this is getting long, y'all. Okay. Which one should we do? Marriage is till death do us part, or divorce affects the children negatively? Okay, I'm gonna go to the children negatively because I feel like we know who stands where on divorce is till death do us part. I think we figured that out for this group of individuals. So let's continue.
divorce affects the children negatively.
Okay, 5 people.
I agree with the fact that it affects children negatively, but I would also like to state that divorce in itself is not tailored to affect children.
Yeah, okay. I agree. Also, divorce affects children negatively. It's about weighing the negative effects. So what's going to affect your child more? Staying within an unhealthy situationship? That's 2024 for you. Staying within an unhealthy situation? Or is the divorce going to negatively impact them? I'm a child of divorce. My parents got divorced when I was around 6 years old. And there's no doubt that has negatively impacted me to not have like a father figure in the home, to not watch a mother and father in a healthy relationship. But who is to say that that is the example of a marriage that I would have had they stayed together? There would have been unhealthy examples that were set forth for me. So you as a person have to weigh those two examples that you can set for your children and decide which one is going to negatively impact them more. And that is what would, define your movements moving down the path when it comes to your relationship. We did get another $50 super chat. Taylor, if you want to read them.
Sure. Frost Tossed again says our society doesn't facilitate healthier ideologies. It likely stimulates the economy. It forced women to work, less time with kids, more time filled with unhealthy consumption. If we did everything that was healthy, our society/economy would collapse.
If we did everything that was healthy? Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, our society doesn't feel. Oh, okay, gotcha. So you're saying that we've made these unhealthy choices in order to stimulate the economy, and if we went back to these healthier decisions, the economy would somehow crash. I guess, yeah, responsively it would, because we've gone down this path towards economic growth in entering the workforce and having less children. Well, having more children would technically stimulate the economy more, but. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's any going back. Once you've sort of opened up Pandora's box, you can't close it again and stuff everything back into it. And I don't think we're going to have some sort of renaissance of women no longer wanting careers or wanting to be stay-at-home moms. And I think you can bring a resurgence of those sort of values, but I don't think you ever really go back to where you were historically on the matter. And what that would do to the economy, I have no idea. I mean, your girl's not an economist. We need Tom Sowell for that.
Let me just put it that way. When you're going through a divorce, one of the most important things the court considers is the custody, guardianship, welfare, advancement, and education of the children. Anything else, as far as those children are concerned, the court puts it aside and focuses on those children to ensure that they come out better.
I want to talk about the mental aspect of, divorce affecting the children. There is no marriage without fights. It is a bitter truth. Let us not deceive ourselves. Even in a family, you see brothers, sisters fighting themselves, talk less of people who come from different groups. So I'm now going back to the children. The children will say all these things. They will expect that, oh, daddy, why are you doing this now? Mommy, calm down. Mommy, go and beg daddy. Daddy, calm down. Daddy, go and beg. It has happened to me. Now, whereby the children now see, oh, mommy is going a separate way, daddy is going a separate way. The children don't always they are not always happy. They are not always. 99% of such children are not always happy.
I think she's exaggerating.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm trying to say in this essence is this. Children from broken home, those ones that are just growing up, not the ones that have come into the world now that are so big that their ears are filled with divorce. I'm talking of children that are just growing. Talk to them. If you talk to these children, they will tell, oh, I don't like the way mommy and daddy are living separately. They will tell you the truth from their hearts. They will go to school. Other children, sometimes they don't even want to play with them. They say, this one, daddy and mommy are not together. Oh, what will she come and tell us now?
I'll use my child as an example.
Yeah, let me pause there. Okay. There's so many ways to unpack this because, again, nuance is so important. A child who is in a situation of divorce, let's say you're 5 years old or something like that. You're seeing mommy and daddy are no longer living in the same house. You have no idea about the inner dynamic of what's happening within their marriage. So, of course, you're going to think, I wish mom and dad were living together. If it's a super unhealthy situation, they probably should not be living together. So the impact of them being together is probably going to be more negative than them being divorced. You just don't understand that because you're 5 years old. Now, if mom and dad are not in a super unhealthy relationship, they just don't like each other anymore, or they just aren't attracted to one another anymore, I think it's within the best interest of the child that you guys put on a good face and you are a mother and father to your child and you handle that situation. James Sexton, who's a divorce lawyer, I believe in New York, does many a talk on the subject of divorce, and one of the main points that he makes in his many discussions of this is that sometimes a man or a woman is not a good partner within a marriage, but they are a fantastic mother or a fantastic father. And to rob a child of a fantastic mother or a fantastic father because you no longer like being in a relationship with them is, I think, a disservice. So I've always said, if I'm with somebody and for some reason we aren't attracted to each other anymore, or we're having little squabbles or whatever, and it's not something that is irreconcilable, well, we are going to put on a good face for our children and be a good mother and father, and we're sticking together to the point where our children are grown and going out of the house, and we are going to be a good mother and father to our children. Now, is that going to withstand abuse or other things that can negatively impact our children? Absolutely not. But dude, if we get to the point of having kids, our lives are no longer about like, oh, how attracted to each other are we? Or, oh my gosh, like, you don't say you love me every single day, or all these different things. It's about our service to our children. And if you truly care about your children, I think it will come in the form of showing them a healthy relationship and what that looks like. Now, not everybody can do that. And obviously the rates of divorce are extremely high, but I do think people are leaving these situations way too soon because they're thinking more about themselves than they are thinking about the dynamic of a family that it is they've created.
Yeah, and I think that you're 100% dead on there. And but the attitude that you are articulating really heavily cuts against sort of the prevailing, I guess, ideology or cultural norm of our society that is this very much individualized, like my identity, my needs, my path for my life, that all comes first, and that's priority. And that people see their relationships and even with their children as subservient to their happiness. And you can't have that attitude when you take on the commitment of a marriage, when you take on the commitment of children. Those come with duties. And though it is now incumbent on you to put yourself below that relationship and below the interests of your children. And like in my vows to my wife, one of the things I said was like, whoever I stood to become as an individual, I'm now putting below what we stand to become together in our marriage. And that is now I'm renouncing my right to become whatever I was going to become in and of myself, and I'm closing that door off to my wife, and my only interest I'm putting below forever is to our relationship. And it takes two people with that attitude mutually to make a marriage work. And so if you're at a place where you're considering divorce, I think you need to have an honest look inward and ask yourself, like, why can't I give, especially if there's kids involved, why can't I give my kids the upbringing of a healthy environment of a two-parent home that they deserve? Why can't I do that? And if that is totally outside of your control because the other person's being abusive or what have you, or unfaithful and willfully just continually, not participating and not following the spirit of the commitment that you made to one another, then I think, yeah, you have to think seriously about getting a divorce at that point. But I would just say, like, don't let it be because you didn't show up. Don't let it be because you weren't the person who was committed to what you entered into in the first place. Don't let it be because you're just selfish, because you just have other pursuits, or you have other inclinations, or you're not feeling it at this time. Don't let that be the reason that it happens. And if both people maintain that attitude, then I think you have a way out and a way for the marriage to persist even through tough times and keep your children first.
100%. That's a very, very great point. Don't let it be you.
I married early. I married at 26. I'm currently 29. I've been 3 years in marriage now.
Wow.
Yes. So within that 3 years, myself and my wife have separated countless times, and we've come back together. So those times when we separate, so when I go there for settlement, when I see my child, I don't feel happy. Like, I feel like he would have been living better if he was with me, but he has no choice. That is where he could stay at that time. Like, one person just decides to, anyhow they want to dress them, or any school they want to take them to. I agree that the court has a say with custody, or how do they call it? But sometimes the court might be wrong. They might give the child to the wrong person. 90% of divorce affects the children more.
You guys are just throwing numbers out now.
That is just throwing numbers out, I think. I don't know where he got that.
Yes, we over-exaggerate when we want to give percentages.
I can't understand where you're.
He said Nigerians, we over-exaggerate and want to give percentages.
I think you get the point.
But
See,
what I'm
just the
saying
same way divorce affects children, there are children from like families that their parents are still together that are affected by that kind of marriage. Like, their children are begging their parents to go to divorce. These are things that I've seen firsthand.
if
can't just chill with
people are
experiences like
bad
that.
parents, that's on them.
Can the disagreeer now speak?
It depends how tender the children are. But if the children are grown-ups and they'll be seeing the beating, the fighting, the separation all the time, so many things are not working well, then they finally divorce themselves. It will not affect those children at all. Because they have been seeing like one person's life is going to go if these two are not staying apart.
I mean, what you are saying, yeah, I understand what you're saying. The children will understand that, like, the divorce is right, it was needed and all that, but I don't think that's enough reason for them not to feel it. I don't think that's enough reason for them not to get affected by it.
The children suffer a huge blow when it comes to divorce. They have a stigma. Wherever they go, they call them children from broken homes. And people see them as
themselves.
children who cannot,
for anything.
yes, they are bound to like influence others negatively.
You can't let other people's judgment of a situation make you choose an unhealthy option. Like, just because people are going to bully you for something or there's some sort of stigma attached to it doesn't mean that that's something you should not do. You shouldn't base your life choices off of other people's perceptions. So that is just it's not quite making sense. And I think you have to think about, especially in instances of abuse, think about the person you're married to, and ask yourself this, and ask yourself before you get married to somebody. I think it's one of the most important questions you can ask yourself before you marry somebody or get in a long-term relationship with somebody or even think about having kids. Say, what if my son or daughter turned out just like the person that I'm going to be marrying? What if they are a direct reflection of the person that I'm going to go sign this legal document with? Would I be happy? Would I be proud? Would I be able to look at my child and say, I'm so glad that I put you in this situation, that you are just like him or her? And if the answer is no, do not get married to that person. In cases of abuse, what if your child turns out to be an abuser just like your husband or wife? Would you be proud and happy with that? And if not, get out of there. Amalgamate all the red flags that you're seeing in this person, whether they're big or small, and think about that being reflected into a little human being, because that's exactly what children do. They absorb everything around them. And if it's mom and dad, they're absorbing mom and dad. So just think about what that's going to look like in life and how that manifests when you bring a family into the world. Now, that was basically the end of that episode. So we're going to get into your super chats. This has been an interesting one, so I want to hear from you guys.
Yeah, guys, you can get them in. Somebody just asked if we're doing it, and yes, indeed, we are doing super chats today. Let's see. Alex Slusher is our first one, who I feel like is first a lot of times. Says, "Happy Monday, everyone. Hope you all had a good weekend. An extra hello to Amala and Taylor."
Oh, thank you. Happy Monday, guys.
Let's see. Stop Simping on Amala says, "Hey there, gang. I had a dream that I was the president and I was giving a speech on what I'd do. We all know who would be the first to be deported, LOL."
Oh my gosh.
I'm guessing the 304s.
Yeah, I have a feeling it's the 304s. We did get a $50 super chat. I don't know if you saw that one come in.
Let me get this one. Kenneth Dowling says, "Hello, Amala. I've been watching your content for some time. As a black man, though I voted Democrat, I agree with most of your viewpoints on black culture, the left, and the climate in America. Enjoyed you on Piers Morgan. I appreciate your voice."
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, Piers Morgan was a very interesting, very black-focused debate, I guess. We got into a lot of different racial issues, so I'm glad that what I've said resonates with you and that you're sort of seeing some of the same things that I'm seeing. It's definitely an interesting time to be alive in Black America.
That it is. Yeah, but thank you, Kenneth. And Taylor Fan Club says, "After a bad day at work, I knew all I needed was the cheerful laughter of 2044 president nominee Amala Ekpunobi and the piercing blue eyes of Hot Boy Taylor. Thanks, guys."
Glad that we could be your pick-me-up today. That's hilarious.
Ekpunobi 44. We need to make that bumper sticker.
Right.
Is that even an election year?
I don't know either. I don't know.
Stop Simping again says, "I was going to say, for all the lonely guys out there, a longtime friend I haven't seen in a while invited me out with her and her friends Saturday night. She complimented my weight loss, muscle tone, and now my straight teeth. Level up. It will pay off, kings. You can do it. Just put in the hard work."
He's looks maxing, guys, and it's paying off. He's getting noticed by the ladies. Okay, good for you. You know what? That's great.
Well, his name was Just Put Me in the Matrix already, so it looks like he is not taking the blue pill or
it's accepting
whatever.
reality, I guess.
Yeah, staying in team reality. I like it. Joy says, have you guys heard about Keeper? It's a matchmaking service, uses AI to help make long-term matches. Their mission is to end loneliness. Sorry to basically make you ad read, but it intrigues me.
That would be interesting. You know, I wonder if AI is more capable of really getting down to brass tacks when it comes to relationships and cutting through some of our like human judgment tendencies. I don't know. Who knows? We are going to do our own little dating thing on this little show here. So if you're a guy in California between the ages of, I don't know, like 26 and 40 who's listening right now, and you're single, keep an eye out because we're gonna show you our bachelorette, if you will. We'll come up with a new name for it all. And we're gonna launch our own dating thing on this very show. So just wait.
I just imagine if you use like Google's AI for the dating and you put in your preferences and say, like, I want a white woman, and it shows you a bunch of black women, stuff like that.
Ladies.
Oh, yikes.
It's hilarious.
Which, speaking of, did you see that Apple is going to maybe use Google's AI for iPhones now?
Oh.
It'll be like the default operating system.
I hope not.
Scary.
Get rid of him. Get rid of him, guys.
Elon, make us a phone. We just gotta keep cranking
keep
out
going to Elon.
Fun stuff. Let's see. Megsy Wanted says, finally made it live. I'm from Austin, and it's basically California now. As much as I'd love to have got here, don't move here. Commenting from a previous video.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I saw some guy on TikTok today that said, like, thank you, Austin, for absorbing all of the migrants from California who are leaving with their horrible ideology. And like, they're all just congregating in Austin. So I feel for you guys who are living over there.
Yeah, I mean, Austin's a cool city. I would have liked to visit it like maybe 10 years ago, but I have no desire to go now just based on things I've heard. Like, I had enough California in California. And I still, to this day, when I'm meeting people in Nashville and they're like, so you're from here? Where are you from? Blah, blah, blah. And I say, yeah, well, I moved here from California. But then I have to qualify it and say, like, but my wife's from the South and I used to live here when I was younger. I went to middle school here. I have connections. Like, you know, I'm not one of those.
I'm one of you guys.
Yeah. But there's definitely a stigma when you say you're from California. Let's see. Bayan Sada says, I'm a Christian Arab from Jordan, the Middle East, and I study and teach English literature. Love you both for helping me stand up for my conservative beliefs.
Hey, very cool. Teaching English lit. I need to like deep dive into English lit and actually read more. I don't read enough. Maybe you should throw your recommendations in the chat.
Drop them. My wife was an English teacher for a few years back in the day, and she's got a bookstagram if you're looking for book recommendations. Peep Ainsley Books. Stop Simping Again says, Amos, are you saying that the majority of divorces are mostly women's fault? I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
I am not saying they're women's fault. To have the majority be initiated by a certain party does not mean that specific party is at fault. And I'm sure actually many of those women would argue that it substantiates another argument that men are in fact more at fault, but it's hard to tell. You'd have to look into all these divorces, find the reason why, do an actual investigation as to who's responsible, how deep the wounds are within the relationship, and then you'd be able to tell. But it's hard. I can't give you guys a whole holistic view of it because I don't know what's going on within y'all's relationships.
Yeah, the red pillars love that stat, but it demands a little more nuance with the analysis. Chicken Pork Adobo says, I'm glad the Philippines is the only country that divorce is illegal. That's why it's encouraged that the couple think deeply before committing.
Yeah, I think it has its benefits and then it has its negatives. I think it's a negative situation to not be able to get out of something that you've entered into, but it's a positive to think twice before you make such a big decision, and maybe, the marriage rates are lower and the divorce rates are lower.
And I wonder also, like, in that country, then what provisions are made? Like, is there like a legal separation or something like that that's provided for? But
you'd hope there's a safety net
of some kind. Let's see. Nicodemus 1984 says, sorry to bring up this question again, but can we expect a release of behind-the-scenes footage or extended interviews from your Unwoke documentary?
Oh, we don't have access to any of that. I'm sorry. That lies within the hallowed halls of Prairie.
Yeah,
we don't have any of that on us.
It's at them now. That's their property.
Yeah, that's theirs.
One one more from Stop Simping. Amala, how was that Olive Garden? Give me that tour of Italy every time. Is it better or worse than the Cheesecake Factory?
That's so
You went to Olive
hilarious.
Garden? Did
Well,
I
I
miss
went to
this?
Olive Garden last night. You must follow Reese on Instagram because Reese posted we went to Olive Garden on last night. We were like, we want to go grab dinner because we were here to film some of her stuff and all that. And then we saw that there was a new Olive Garden like 2 miles down the road, and we're like, hell yeah, we're going to Olive Garden. I didn't try the Tour of France though, but no, it was good. It was solid. It's not better than Cheesecake Factory, but it's great. I love Olive Garden salad. I don't know if that's like weird, but I feel like their salad is super.
The salad and breadsticks is fire. Just
fire.
We used to go to during lunch and just get the soup salad and breadsticks and
You know
throw it
what?
out.
Any day, I'll take it.
Were you family when you were you here? Your family?
Oh, it's America's restaurant, really.
Yeah, it's wholesome. Your family's broken. Just go to Olive
Yep.
Garden. You'll feel better.
Just go to Olive Garden.
Let's see. Megzy Wanted 18 says, my mom was married before she married my dad, and in her church they allowed an annulment because of infidelity. Even for her, divorce shouldn't be quote unquote normalized, but it should be destigmatized.
Yeah, see, I can agree with that.
fair.
Yeah, destigmatize, especially when you're going through stuff and somebody's just like somebody stepping out on you or just disrespecting you over and over and over. Why should you have to withstand that?
Dale just sends a super chat. Oh, here it is, a message. I was far right, but some bad experiences in the church and military pushed me left. I've since moved back right and really appreciate y'all's moderate, non-dogmatic, non-ideological takes.
Yeah, we're sitting like a little center leaning to the right, chilling here, having these conversations. Yeah, it's interesting that our life experiences can just throw us in different directions, and it's nice to just sort of try to establish your values and like first principles, so that way life doesn't throw you around and ragdoll you so much when you experience things.
Mm-hmm. And all about non-dogmatic, non-ideological, though. Hopefully this is a refuge for you, whether you're coming from the left or the right. Kwazakula says, I share that kid's passion, not his stance. The arguing arises because we have different definitions and circumstances of marriage. Amala, am I getting based yet?
Yeah, you sound really very nuanced. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's interesting. He did have a lot of passion. I will give him that. We love some passion. We could just reel it in a little bit, because you can tell, like, if you compare him to Fizeo, you can tell Fizeo's very passionate, but it just comes off as just a very calm, mild-mannered communication, which is just the most effective when you're trying to persuade people, or even not even persuade people, just have a conversation.
Yeah, it's like they say, it's the confidence for me, but not in a good way.
Yeah.
Just because you confident. You see this a lot in like online videos and debates and stuff where like someone just comes off super aggressive and confident and you're like, wait, what did you just say? That didn't even make sense. Or you just made a really like bad argument. But
gosh, yeah.
The impression can be though that, oh, that person's winning if you're not paying attention.
Where I experienced this recently, and I forget what the girl's name was. It was a Jubilee episode of cheaters versus like non-cheaters or something. And there was one woman on that show, maybe I need to react to it on here, that was just coming off as like so confident. Like she was giving counselor vibes, but she was saying some of the like most some of the most refutable stuff she was saying is just insane, but she was saying it so confidently. I forget what her name was. Maybe we'll react to that down the line on this channel, because that episode really got me. There was a lot of interesting conversations in that one.
Megsy again says, for me, the normalization of marriage is Kim K saying marriages come and go, children, and you're stuck for life, which is not a good mentality.
I understand where she's coming from, and I don't know the specific instance where she would have said that, but my mentality, at least as far as relationships go, is that, yeah, you can be married to somebody, but, you know, in the current state that we live in, marriages are disbandable. When you have kids, that is a relationship that you are tied together for forever, and there's no getting out of it. Whether it's like, you know, you're co-parenting or you're living together and it's like a nuclear household, maybe that's what she might have meant. And if that is the case, I can sympathize with exactly what she's saying. You know, marriage is a real thing and it's a real commitment that you make to somebody, but children is a whole nother level And if somebody wants to get out of a marriage, they can very well do that so long as they have enough passion towards the endeavor of getting out of it. But once you have children in this world, you're stuck. You're stuck with the person, you're stuck with that relationship, which is why it's a very, very real thing to consider and hope that you're in the best position to do so.
Smithy J says, do you think breaking away from the baggage of marriage puts parents in a better position to support a child? As a kid, I can say people like Amala and Taylor can help fill the gap of fatherlessness.
Yeah, it's interesting that is kind of the world we live in now. You have, it's like supplemental parenting is happening on the internet a little bit, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, I mean, I think the initial question was, can getting out of the marriage sort of be a healthier situation for children? In many instances, yeah. In many instances, no. But we don't want to like defer parenting and values-based education to people on the internet. And I'll be the first to say, I can't be your daddy. Because, as much as I'd like to think I would bestow like, good things upon children or whatever, I don't want that responsibility, and we shouldn't give the internet that responsibility. It's unfortunate that like even within nuclear families, kids are being parented by the internet. It's scary.
That's a whole nother situation. Chantel Nicole says, divorce is sad under any circumstances. I married 15 years, 2 kids later. However, after a long time affair and an ultimatum given, he left, but found out my marriage license was never filed. It got lost in a church fire. Hot take? ?
Whoa. I don't know about any. It's certainly a hot take.
Yeah,
pun intended. But wow, what a roller coaster that would have been to go on. Yeah, it's like nobody enters marriage, I don't think. Well, of course, there's exceptions. There's like sugar babies and all this different stuff. But I don't think most people enter marriages thinking like, I can't wait for this to end in divorce. So that's for the most part always an unfortunate occurrence, whether or not you're doing it for a healthy reason or an unhealthy one.
And Chantel adds, for context, this was over a decade ago. I've never remarried, LOL. I've flip-flopped between being an eligible single and being too sticky a situation over the years. I take marriage seriously.
Yeah, especially you have kids now. It's like a difficult thing. Which is why it's, so important, the decisions that we make, especially when you have kids, because now they're influenced by all the decisions that you make and where you go moving forward. And wow, it's a sticky situation, most definitely.
Onion says, confronted my wife when I found out she wasn't faithful. Then she asked for a divorce. Still eats me up today. Neither of us, quote unquote, believed in divorce.
Yeah, see, and then you'll get people who say that, and then it doesn't quite live up to what they've said. When you get further down the line, and yeah, there's just so many situations to account for. That's why when people give like blanket prescriptions for how they believe the world ought to be, it just doesn't account for what actually is and what happens.
Right. It's like when you're the one that's hurt, will you live up to these sweeping, convictions that you're placing? And that's that's tough, man. Quazakule again says, Taylor, and maybe Amala too, I recommend a video titled The Dark World of Megachurches by James Johnny. Really makes you see some religious evils.
Oh, I think I've watched that video before. I think it's like a mini documentary. It's nuts. Which we all know what's going on in the megachurches, hopefully. If you don't watch the video, it's nutty, the amount of money that is going through.
Yeah, I know that world a little better than I would like to, having come from some mega churches in my background. I've seen some of the like Hillsong documentaries and a couple other ones, and indeed lived through some pretty crazy stuff. I am actually really interested in all of those, and I think they do create important conversations. If at times they are often just done as like hit pieces or just to let wounded people bleed. You can't really blame them because they often have legitimate hurt, but sometimes I think they're, I don't know, ill-conceived. But alas, like we say with everything, we always want nuance in the conversation. Jasmine Y says, hi Amala, if marriage is just a piece of paper, just do it. You don't have to have a big wedding party. There are by far more benefits than downsides.
Yeah, I have not been convinced of an argument that gives me more benefits than downsides to the choice. It's so funny because I went with a friend for dinner and we sat for like 3 hours and we debated back and forth of our different stances of marriage. She happens to be married. Of course, I'm not married and have no intentions of getting married. So we went and talked about this for like 3 hours and went through every single argument that people make for marriage and people make against it. And again, I'm not advising that anybody do anything specific with their lives. I just have not been convinced of any benefits really of getting married or any sort of dynamics within married couples that cannot be emulated outside of going to sign, that piece of paper. And I'm just not the type of person that can be compelled to do something for the sake of doing it, especially when the principles that I have speak to not doing that thing and not allowing for, the government intervention into my relationship. I'm like, F them. I'm going to have a very successful nuclear household without doing this thing that you tell me that I have to do for some reason.
Which is, I mean, you're living out your ethos of like not just not entering into something that you don't actually have a desire for or a see the purpose in following through with that. So even as someone who's very pro marriage and believes in it and could have one of those 3-hour conversations with you, I actually commend you for being true to yourself, because the last thing you'd want is to do something that make you feel disingenuous. So
there we go. But y'all, don't worry. I'm all for the men and women being together long term, having kids, sticking by those children, and staying until death do them part, or whatever that is. But I just haven't been convinced of the logistics of that. Yeah.
Well, I think too, like, I could see where a lot of the difficulty in arriving there would arise from just the ambiguity around how we have our current conception of marriage in our culture. And like historically, marriage has functioned as the type of relationship that you just described. And yet we've arrived at a place in culture now where marriage is kind of something different, or we don't even know what it is. And so if you're taking a particular line of reasoning and saying like, well, it's because of the state's interest in it, you should do this, this, and this. And that's, I wouldn't find that a compelling argument either. But if I'm not a religious person, I wouldn't necessarily find the religious angle compelling.
Exactly.
So
there's
I can see how that discussion would be very like the threads would fall apart, and you're like, well, why would I take this whole thing if there's so much ambiguity around it?
Yeah, it's like if you're not convinced of the religious aspect of marriage, and then you're definitely not convinced of like the government intervention aspect of marriage, there doesn't leave much real reason to get married. But guess what? They pigeonhole you anyways, because you're common law married after like 10 years or whatever, and they still get to know all of your business, and there's legalities to the whole situation, which I understand protects people who are in long-term relationships where there is like assets moving around, and you're financially dependent on other people, and you leave the situation and you need some sort of legal reinforcement for having assets on the way out. But just for me, I'm not a concern for me. So all the things that would be concerns for people who are invested in the institution of marriage just don't happen to be concerns to me. It's really as simple as that. And I'll never ardently like defend that people should or shouldn't do something like the red pillars or whatever. I'm just gonna say, just not for me.
To each their own.
Charlize Theron.
Chicken Pork Adobo says, we value marriage, though divorce is illegal in the Philippines. There's a legal way to get out of a relationship, especially if it's abusive. Okay, we speculated about that earlier.
That's good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
Mimi Broadbent says, hey guys, I consider myself liberal but love your videos. I think it's a problem people only listen to their own side. Also love your fashion sense.
Oh, thank you. That's so very sweet. We love all of our liberals and lefties who watch the show and are interested in just hearing a different take. You guys are always welcome here, and I love that you're here and commenting. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's the best when like in the same show we get people who are like, I like you as a conservative. I like you as a liberal. Like, that tells me we're doing something right.
That's awesome.
Meg again says, to clarify the Kim Kardashian quote, it was her equating marriage to something easy to escape because of divorce, but you can't escape a relationship when you have a child. In my view, it diminishes the value.
Well, I guess I look at it from, is what she's saying real? Is it pretty easy to leave divorce? As of our current state of society, it is pretty easy. Like, it's not a very difficult thing. It's cheap to leave a marriage. You just gotta, so long as you're not like lawyering up and going through all this stuff. Technically, what she's saying is very much true. Marriages can be left and left very quickly. Children cannot be left, and they certainly cannot be left quickly. You'd be dealing with a lot of different other issues and barriers and hurdles. Now, you could argue that maybe she's sort of flippantly diminishing marriage, but I might say that she's kind of got her finger on the pulse there as far as what she's saying. It does seem to play out that way.
Yeah, and I mean, I think based on the quote, she's talking less about escaping parenthood and more about escaping a relationship once you have kids. And in that sense, there's truth to it, but then there's also the fact that, like, even if you divorce that person and leave them, like, you're still going to have to deal with them in co-parenting or deal with their absence. So
so they're still there.
Yeah. Whenever Farley says, "This show's awesome. My mom's been married 6 times. That's why I'm in therapy."
Oh, that's a lot of marriages. 6 times is a lot. It's interesting to enter a legal and personal agreement that says "till death do us part" 6 times. You know what? It's very interesting to have that, like, fervent belief in marriage be tested so many times and still continue to be married. I would be so curious as to why she continues to marry partners rather than just staying in a long-term relationship with somebody and seeing if that stands the test of time. Just after a certain point, after a few marriages, I myself would be thinking, you know what, maybe the marriage thing is not for me. The common denominator in this one is actually me once we get to the number 6.
Yeah, that's a handful. And I mean, they brought up that statistics during the talk today was about if people who have been divorced previously have higher rates of divorce in successive marriages. And that, I mean, it stands to reason. But yeah, as a pro-marriage person, I would say maybe hold off on that 3rd or 4th until you're like, give it, I don't know, more time and more therapy.
Yeah. Like, it's so funny to me.
Have to go through more therapy.
Because Dennis Prager is like, get married. He's been married 3 times, which I think is it's just so interesting. It's like you're telling people get married. But yeah, it's just interesting. People have their certain things that they just really, really, really believe, and that's okay.
Smithy J says, do people like Charlie Kirk overlook things like poverty and mass incarceration in the divorce rates in the Black community?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I imagine that's got to have some sort of impact. Of course, poverty. We know, like, finances is way up there. You'd have to do a real deep dive. And I don't know where that information is aggregated as to the rate of divorce, why the divorces are happening. If that's broken down by race, that would be something to look into. I would imagine that mass incarceration may play a role, although I don't know what the connection would be. Like, if somebody is committing crimes or is at risk of incarceration, is that the type of person that's ever going to be married in the first place? Or, there's so much to think about. I would have to look into that.
AC LOTR fan says, hello, Hamala and Taylor. I recently moved countries for a jewelry job, and watching your live streams make being away from everyone I know easier.
Oh, that is so sad and so sweet. I'm so glad that it's making it a little easier, that you have your common people to come to 3 times a week and we can sit and talk about stuff.
Yes. Thanks for processing this crazy clown world that we live in together with us. I think this is our last one from the day from Celtic Blacksmith. Says, I'm not even worried about divorce until I find a chloroform recipe that lasts through the wedding. These ladies keep ripping the duct tape and running.
Wait, what? Hold on.
It's like dark humor.
I know it's dark humor. I had to think about it a little bit. I was like, oh, okay. Well, that doesn't seem like a healthy way to go about things. But I hope you figure it out. Not in the sense that I hope you find a better chloroform recipe. In the sense that I hope we figure out a better way to get your, a better, more consensual way to get your bride to the altar. Maybe Love is Blind. Maybe Love is Blind is a good. Maybe. Well, we had one couple be successful on this season of.
Yeah, that was a low success rate, but. Sorry, I did miss one from Frostcost. He says, there are now 2 rents to pay, 2 jobs required. Divorce lawyers literally want you to divorce. The success of our economy relies on unhealthy choices.
I don't know that. Obviously, like, divorce keeps divorce lawyers in business. I don't know that they're like scheming that far into like, this stimulates the economy by separating this household into 2 different, segments. Maybe to some extent, but I don't know that. I think most people are just like trying to do what they gotta do and trying to find love, and they want people to be successful. I don't think most divorce lawyers are like reveling in the fact that people are breaking up their own marriages. And I would imagine that many a divorce lawyer is probably married themselves or previously married, and maybe just came to understand why divorce might be something that people seek and wanted to be able to fulfill and help people in that transitional process. And I'm sure others are exploiting the fact that people are getting divorced all the time. There's going to be a mixture of people within.
In a free market economy, the opportunists are going to be there for good decisions or bad decisions. And people who are profiting off of people's bad decisions will want those bad decisions to be made at a larger scale and with greater depth and implications.
100%.
And vice versa. So it's like the question is, how can you use the light touch of government and better cultural norms to direct incentive structures toward the positive ones rather than the negative ones? But you can quickly descend into tyranny that way, or sort of a moralistic culture. So anyway, we can talk about these things all day. Celtic Blacksmith says, Amo, it's so cool that you take me seriously. LOL. When are you going to learn? I'm almost always joking with every sentence that comes out.
No, you are quite the jokester in the super chats. You, and I hope Alex is joking half the time.
We're still not sure about that one.
We're not sure about Alex. It's just a hope that he's joking. But we're on that one, guys.
And all right, we made it.
We made it to the end of Super Chats. Guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. This was a fun and interesting one. We don't normally get into conversations about Nigerian culture or let alone, debates that sort of hinge on Nigerian culture. But this one was an interesting one. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below how you feel about the many topics that we discussed. As always, if you disagree with anything I said, duke it out, but do so respectfully. And if you like this video, subscribe. Click the notification bell to be notified every single time we're live. That's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern. Plus, we post videos for you guys every single day. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on this Monday or Tuesday, wherever you are. And we will see you next time.